Okay.
Here we are. How do we know if there's anybody watching? We can only hope, right?
Let's see.
Anyhow, I hope you are. I hope you're here. I hope you at some point. So we're just getting organized on this end. This is still pretty new to us, and so cut us a little slack. We're trying to get up to speed with this and getting really excited about it. So, and I'm glad Zen is here with me today.
Yeah,
So
there's some people joining.
great.
You can see up here.
Okay, great. Every screen's a little bit different, so this is fun. Why don't we give people a little bit of time to get in?
Yeah.
And talk about, let's see, I'm curious what your day has been like so far, right? Oh, I went to the grocery store with my mask intact, and I'll tell you what, this is crazy. The grocery store where I shop was packed with orchids for sale.
Oh.
And I can't get one orchid to bloom.
Yeah, I know.
I want to know how they do that because they're gorgeous. They're beautiful. And I do have one. I should have brought it
I
to show
thought you
you.
had gotten one.
Finally, after a year,
Yeah.
I have one orchid that has one little sweet, I just am like, grow, grow. And it has 3 little buds, and I bet by the end of next week, and it's amazing how slowly they grow. So it would be so interesting. Maybe there's a documentary somewhere. It'd just be interesting to see what happens inside an orchid factory. I know that's random. I mean, it's a greenhouse, it's not a factory. They're not building them 3D, but anyhow. So that's my curiosity today. Well,
Yeah.
there's more where that came from. Anyhow, great.
Yeah, why don't we?
Let's start.
Yeah.
We've only been sitting here for 30 minutes, twiddling our thumbs, dying to get going anyhow. So welcome to our series on the Cornerstones of Creativity. And we're delighted that you're here. And we were talking about the fact that this is so much right now what we live and breathe that it's easy to assume that everybody else is on that same wavelength with us, when in fact, that's not necessarily true. And the world doesn't revolve around what we're thinking about and doing. But we really want to share this with you because the deeper we dive into what I have come to think of as creative intelligence, we have lots of different kinds of intelligence, and Gardner actually had a theory that included 7 or 8 different kinds of intelligence that human beings have. And then we can think of emotional intelligence. Daniel Goleman's book on that was a really groundbreaking proposal for a lot of us. And so now I'm thinking about creative intelligence and realizing that what I used to think was relegated to the studio for people who just wanted to make things is actually much, much bigger than that, and much more important to each of us in terms of how we cultivate joy. And that's basically why we're here. And so we're going to talk each week about one of the other cornerstones each of the cornerstones as I've identified them and as we've discussed them. And we're welcoming your questions, and we're going to kick it off. We thought we might kick it off. Would you like to share our core beliefs as a way of getting started?
Sure. I'm sorry. I'm recovering a little bit from a cold earlier in the week, so forgive my deep voice. But I thought we should maybe just quickly introduce ourselves, because
yeah.
I feel like we're used to having this CST community that we've been a part of for years, but we're obviously always trying to welcome in new people, and maybe everyone watching today that isn't as familiar with us.
Yeah, maybe they just stumbled onto this and like, what's going on here?
Right, maybe.
So maybe,
Yeah.
okay. All right, well, my name's Jane Dunewald, and I've been an artist for a really long time, most of my adult life. And I'm also a writer and a teacher, and I am, at this point in my life, really drawn to unraveling aspects of creativity, because I know from the teaching that I do how much it enriches people's lives, to begin to see where the opportunities to be creative are within the context of what they love and their preferences. And you are?
I'm Zena. I'm Jane's daughter, And I've worked with Mom for 7 or 8 years now, just transitioning some of her, basically supporting her technically, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
with website design and things like that. I've worked in all kinds of jobs and roles, but currently I'm a technical consultant, and I love being part of this community because I approach it, I feel like, in a completely different way than Mom does. Her whole life has been spent creating art and living in this creative space, whereas I feel like I come at it as kind of a beginner, even though I've been around her, obviously, for years and years. And so I feel like maybe I provide a balance,
Mm-hmm.
because to the whole goal of strengthening our creativity
Mm-hmm.
and learning about it.
Yeah, I think it's balanced, but I think it's also that you have a particular perspective, partly because of your age and partly because you and I, personality-wise, are quite different, really.
Yeah, yeah,
And we grew up together, so we had to work that out.
yeah,
We didn't have a mediator. So in any event, I think that's one of the greatest gifts that you bring to this, is that you have your own perspective and you've grown into being your own person. And so I don't think I ever dictated anything based on my memories of you from day one. But on the other hand, I think there's a certain adult thing that's really important to witness in, especially in your own children, when they claim their own lives.
yeah, yeah. And I really felt, I feel that this is so important because as a non-artist, I'm not making my living um, creating art, teaching art, or selling art, but I still find such value in finding ways to be creative and developing that creativity in my own life in so many ways.
Mm-hmm.
So, um,
Great.
yeah.
So that's
So,
who we are.
yeah. So back to the core beliefs.
Okay.
So CST was started about 5 years ago, and we have these core beliefs now, and they have not changed.
Mm-hmm.
They're strong. And I
Mm-hmm.
think the first is creativity is not available to just creatives. Like just what I was saying. You don't necessarily need to label yourself as an artist to find um, strength and joy in creativity, in strengthening your creativity. It's a human and innate ability. And
Turning up the sound a little bit.
yeah. And the next is creativity is an essential tool that makes navigating the modern world more fun and rewarding. Community is an important component of creative living, and you are worth it. You deserve to be here. Everyone deserves to find the time, make the time to think about their own creativity and strengthen it.
Mm-hmm. In that sense, I think it's an aspect of self-care.
Absolutely, yes. Yes.
So those are the things that ring truest for us. And this week, the topic is curiosity. And as is so often true, I was coming back from the grocery store after I was admiring all those beautiful orchids and listening to The Hidden Brain, which may or may not be familiar to you. It's a show on NPR that's broadcast here on Saturdays. And the person being interviewed was talking about certainty, and apparently has written a book on how certainty can get in the way of lots of things, including humility. And I had never really connected these dots before. But then he brought up curiosity as being one of the key components to literally mitigating or overcoming certainty.
Mm-hmm.
We can be so certain about things that we're no longer curious about them. And it's when we are no longer really curious, then the takeaway for me, only listening to it for 10 minutes in the car before I had to come in, was that when we lose the ability to be curious, then we're also losing an opportunity to connect with lots of things that happen in our daily lives and things that we're learning about at a deeper level. And we're kind of skating across the surface in a rather, at least for me, unfulfilling way. And I think a lot of people are feeling that that sense of being unfulfilled without recognizing that maybe it's because they let their curiosity go,
Mm-hmm.
if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I was thinking of it then about like 4-year-olds,
Yeah.
because we got one,
Yes.
and how curious 4-year-olds are, and they're always asking why. And more than one parent has probably said to a 4-year-old, just stop asking so many questions and get in the car.
Or because I said so.
Or because I said so. And so when you look at it from that perspective, it's not hard to understand why we get some of the curiosity in us not taken out as much as just sort of tamped down,
Mm-hmm.
maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And then I loved what you were telling me about trying to teach Zira to ride the scooter. Can you share that story?
Yeah. I've obviously been thinking about curiosity, especially a lot this week in preparation for this stream. And I made my list about, various things I wanted to explore and think about. But then, kind of out of nowhere, a few days ago, I was out with my 4-year-old trying to teach her how to ride this new scooter. And I hadn't expected it to really be a challenge. She's fairly coordinated. I don't know. I just hadn't thought about it before, but it was just um, like it was a complete challenge for her. She just couldn't get her leg to move at the right angle and way with her body to make herself go, and she was getting very frustrated. Um, and I realized that I had to really be intentional with my words in how to tell her how to move her body, because she's very literal, and it was just this interesting challenge for me, and it led to me thinking more about and being curious about kind of teaching her in general, whether it be a physical activity or something else, and how um, I can frame things in a way that she hears them and takes them in a way that I'm intending,
Mm-hmm.
to be able to to help her,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um,
And when you told me that story, then I immediately riffed on the approach, I think, not just me, but a lot of educators, a lot of people in jobs. I mean, this is why it's so easy to see how important this aspect of creativity is, no matter what you're doing. It filters into nonprofit work, it filters into volunteer work, it filters into anything where you're connecting with other people in a way. So in 2019, when we talked about curiosity, I was still in a really narrow mindset of thinking about curiosity as it applied to me,
mm-hmm,
as it applied to me, what was I curious about?
mm-hmm,
I never, God, when you have those little moments of self-reference and you realize how selfish and narrow-minded you've been, it's kind of a setback.
mm-hmm.
But I thought, oh, this time around, I thought, oh, I see. The curiosity that we want to cultivate can be being curious about a particular thing in the studio, but it's just as important and just as creative to be curious when you're curious about how best you could explain something. So a student, whether the student is, like one of our friends, Barb, I had worked with these kids who really needed her to think through how to explain things to them in order to be successful. And anybody who teaches encounters that. And I certainly encountered it and worked really hard to think about the words, just like you in the scooter, the words I was using when I explained a process to my students so that I wouldn't accidentally mislead them
Yeah,
by choosing the wrong words.
yeah, mm-hmm,
So I just think that's a really interesting aspect to it that is on a much larger community scale than the curiosity that we're certainly each entitled to feel about things that we're interested in pursuing, or where orchids grow,
right,
that
right,
sort of thing.
yeah. Something else I was thinking about this week is when we can be curious about something and then want to pursue it. And a struggle for me is always just overcoming that hurdle and actually just sitting down and doing it.
Mm.
The negative self-talk is, I have strategies, and, I think we all have to deal with that, but it's just like, I'm going to be bad at it. Why, why
Right.
sit down? And I've never done it before. And then it's like, why do we have the expectation that we should be good at something the first time we do it? It's
Oh,
and
that's the $1,000,000 question.
exactly, it makes no sense.
Mm-mm.
And so then coming back to the concept of beginner's mind and approaching something like a child would, they don't really think that they should be good at it. They just wonder about, how to do it or what it
Mm-hmm.
means.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and consciously trying to do that and be mindful the first time I try and do something. And so actually, I caught myself. At first, I was kind of frustrated when I was telling her how to, trying to teach her how to ride the scooter, but I'd never. She's my first kid. I've never really had to do that before, so I
Mm-hmm.
had to take a step back and come back to the beginner's mind myself and kind of approach it in a more open-minded way.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank God she's only on a scooter and you're not teaching her to drive.
Oh my gosh.
It'll give you some time to figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, golly. Well, while you were talking, I was thinking about another aspect of it, and now it's so elusive it might have slipped away. I might have to
That's
come back
okay.
to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we should maybe just address the question we're here to discuss,
Okay.
which is if I'm creative and how can I discover that creativity inside me and strengthen it?
Great. So now we're taking it back on some level, we're taking it back to the personal,
Mm-hmm.
and then we'll expand it back into the more
General things we all
general
deal
thing.
with.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I think, oh, I know what, I've got to finish this thought before we get to this.
Okay.
Because as you were talking, I was thinking, I don't know where this phrase came from. There are a couple of them. One is, I know it's Nike, just do it.
Yeah.
And the other one is failure is not an option. Do you know where that came
I don't
from? Is
remember.
that military?
Could be.
I don't know. I don't know. And you know what I thought is that those kinds of statements, you understand why Nike would say that, I suppose. Well, it's a marketing strategy. But on the other hand, that's the kind of buck up and get going encouragement that generations of human beings have gotten,
Mm-hmm.
in our culture especially. And I have a feeling that that's too many of us interpreted that literally.
Hmm.
So it was like failure's not an option, so we don't even get to consider what we don't get to consider what all the other options are before we just freak out because we can't fail. We can't fail. And if we're afraid we're going to fail, then we don't try.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I was just thinking about that as you were speaking, is that I think a lot of us have gotten shut down and don't, and I'll come back to the personal thing here in a minute, but I think in an interesting overall sense, what we need to confront collectively is that it's okay to fail, and it's okay to sit and think about because plenty of all artists make things that don't work,
Mm-hmm.
and they break them up, or they hopefully they destroy them so they don't end up in some gallery later, an embarrassment after you're dead. But I mean, I hate to say that, but I've seen some. There's a museum, I won't say where, it'd be bad form, but everything in it is an example of the worst thing that the artist ever did. But now I'm pontificating. Okay. Okay. So if we go to the personal of how can I discover creativity inside me and strengthen it, we can't just say, go do it.
Right.
We can't just say, get up in the morning and go in your studio and by God, spend 10 minutes doing something in there. And we can't really say, well, what are you curious about? That doesn't work. Why are you laughing?
I don't know. It's like yin and yang all the time, and there's just always a paradox for me because some of it does come down to just telling myself to just
Oh,
sit
yeah,
down for 10
okay.
minute.
Okay.
But I understand what you mean,
Yeah.
and it has to be internal. You definitely can't
There.
tell someone else.
That's
But
the key right there. You
yeah,
can't tell somebody else to just go do it,
yeah,
but you can say that to yourself. And sometimes we need that sort of self-discipline. And
yeah.
sometimes we have to take, let's turn the curiosity thing around here a minute. Maybe we need to be curious, allow ourselves to be curious about what will happen if we actually do sit down for 10 minutes. And I think a lot of this, frankly, is tricking the logical brain, because the logical brain can figure out all kinds of reasons not to do something indefinitely.
Mm-hmm.
The logical brain can keep you stuck right in your chair or wherever when you need to break through. And part of that means being willing and developing a strategy truly for setting the rational thinking aside, which is why I'm such a big fan of feeling emotionally preferences. What would you like to do?
Yeah, that's big. That's big.
Well, I'm curious about what you would like to do. And sometimes people don't know what they like to do. And so then I think one of the strategies that isn't too threatening, I hope, would be to sit down and make a list of things that really appeal to you that you would like to learn to do.
Mm-hmm.
Or that you'd like to just play with and allow yourself to fail. Can I show you something I was curious about?
Yes, please.
Okay. Let me move your journal. I need my cards. Okay, so when you and I were talking about this 2 or 3 weeks ago, I was also teaching this color class. And in the color class, we were talking about achromatic value. See, we're all-purpose conversation here. We were talking about achromatic value, and that being white and gray and black with no color added to it. And I was picturing, because we are in a little community where people are wearing their masks, and so I don't go lots of places, but I venture out. And so I ventured out to a Lowe's, and I picked up more than this. There you go. Color chips that were all white. They all had names: extra white, origami white, ultra white, bistro white, light moss. Well, that's not white. Alabaster. So I picked these all up, and then I came home, and what I wanted to do was a couple of collages that explored whether or not I could differentiate between these white chips and whether it would be interesting, whether I would like it, because I know from studying lots of things, including color field painting, that there are paintings that are very, very, very subtle, and some of them are white, mm-hmm. sometimes overpainted over another background, but in any event, it's going to be hard to see. Yeah, maybe next time we'll do a screen share, because a couple of these really have a tint that isn't very accurate. But so I did this collage, and then I did another one.
Let's see. There you go.
Can't really see the chips at the top, can you? Yeah.
Yeah, very,
very faintly.
Yeah.
Well, in any event, and if I'd really been thinking about doing this for you instead of just because I was curious, maybe I would have used other colors. But the point is, I wanted to see what would happen with all those whites, and I wanted to compare them. And this seemed like a good way to do it. And when I got them finished, they were fun. They were fun to make. But they don't hold my interest. And so I learned something from the 2 or 3 hours that I put into making these that answered at least part of my question. I understand now how all of these whites can look quite different from each other when they're relative to each other in a composition, but that doesn't mean I want to work with it. And so I answered my question, and now that's done.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes in the studio, back to this, how can I discover the creativity inside me? Paint chips, get some and play with them. But no matter what you do, be prepared for the reality that sometimes you're going to ask yourself a question or want to explore something, and then just because you don't enjoy it doesn't mean you didn't learn something from it.
Mm-hmm.
And you never have to do it again. It just means that you at least got up and committed to doing something. And then sometimes, like with this, I thought, I'm going to go get a lot of chips in 2 complements next. And I'm going to do a similar sort of thing with those. And I bet I'll like that more because essentially I just really love to work with color. So there was a lot of potential in the exercise itself that I dreamed up with the cards. And just because the white didn't do it for me doesn't mean something else might not. And if I got those done and I really liked them, then maybe it would be a springboard to another thing, which is, I think, how curiosity works. We start with one thing and then it's a springboard to the next thing or not. But either way, we're moving. And yeah, I'm looking at the comments. Monica
Yeah.
says failure often brings discovery.
And I identify with what Joanne said, often too many creative choices. And I can sit down and have a list of all of the things I would love to explore and learn more about. And then I'm like, I have an hour. I have this hour, and I feel so much pressure to pick the perfect, correct thing to learn about. And I stall out. And that's been a challenge for me. And I think going back to the concept of limitations that you wrote about in the book, Creative Strength Training, has helped me in just choosing. Earlier this week, I chose to work with watercolor. And it's just like, okay, I'm looking at a blank page. What do I do? And choosing 2 colors to work with. And I'm going to just try and draw and then paint and color some flowers. And just really boxing myself in that way helped. So I don't, is that, how do you use that concept when you're, starting some new artwork or just starting to explore something? Do you feel that overwhelmed, or have you been working in the studio so long that you just have kind of instant strategies to get going now?
Do I walk on water? Not yet. Kathy pretty much says it there. Too many ideas and not enough time.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, that sums it up. No. And here's another interesting one before it passes. Personal mantra. Think bigger, bolder, brave. I think self-talk is, first of all, I do think self-talk's really important.
Yeah, absolutely.
And encouraging ourselves and choosing the language that we're using and saying, you know what, you can do this, and gently, instead of just commanding.
I actually was taking notes as I was doing watercolor, and I kept just running into the thought of it's not very good. Like I was just preparing myself, if someone else was to see it, to just say, oh, it's not very good. But I immediately kind of tried to X that out in my writing, in my journal, and replace it with it's a start, or that felt good. That felt good to make. And I immediately felt better shifting that self-talk and our own. And so it all comes back to mindfulness, really, and kind of watching our thoughts and identifying them, as helpful or not helpful.
Yeah, because they're passing through in ways that we need to be, we need to be mindful of what's happening there, because it can infiltrate everything.
And shut us down, and then you just stop. Yeah, it's not good. Exactly. Why am I doing this?
Exactly. And Darlene has pointed out that it must have been the book Failure is Not an Option, written by NASA.
Oh, I think someone else identified that.
Yeah,
NASA
well, if
earlier.
You're sending a rocket ship up, failure is not an option. But we're not there yet.
No.
We're not there yet. But that's really important, because even that's a distinction. That'd be an elephant in the room if that wasn't acknowledged. We're talking, so now we're back to the really, really personal. The really personal thing for us is, how are we going to break through the intimidation? And your idea is a really good idea. When you notice, which is why a lot of people don't want to write, but it's easier to notice the negative thoughts when you're writing it, as opposed to thinking it. When you're thinking it, I think it's a little bit more elusive, and that can be problematic.
It's harder to slow down and identify them, I think.
Yeah,
it just kind of spirals out.
Yeah, I think there's something about writing that's really tangible, so you can write it, you can cross it out.
Yeah.
And so even if you're not a big writer, you could make a list of some of the negative things that flow through your head. Just make a list of 10 negative things you think about yourself, or or say inside your head, or that somebody else has said to you that's playing in your head, because that's equally destructive.
Yeah.
And then cross that out on the paper and write the new thought.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's what that's a strategy there.
Yeah, I like what Emily said, speak to yourself kindly as you would to a child or a
Exactly.
friend. And then
Exactly.
Emma, also, it's about the journey.
Yeah, you would never say to Ziri, now you get on that damn scooter, and if you can't ride it over there in the next 10 minutes, we're done and I'm giving it away. You would never say that.
Or just tell her she's bad at it. Ever.
No, oh, you're the worst at this. There's no point doing this anymore.
Yeah.
And yet a lot of us heard that kind of crap when we were
Yeah.
little. Hopefully you never did.
Not from you.
Okay, fair enough.
I think we all get it at some point.
For my evil twin.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we've all got one of those too.
Yeah.
It's called the shadow. Okay. Anyway, so back to breaking through, other ideas for breaking through. I do think, and I don't know, I'm good on lists, but maybe you can sit and you can just think to yourself, what are a couple of things I've always really wanted to explore? Or just, I think your idea with the watercolor is perfect. Just, especially so many of us have this wealth, an embarrassment of riches when it comes to stuff in the studio.
Mm-hmm.
And I literally had to put a sign up on the wall one time that said, use what's here, because my biggest avoidance behavior, it was before Amazon, but my biggest avoidance behavior was getting in the car and going and just walking through the halls of Home Depot, the hallowed halls of Home Depot, and looking for stuff that might pique my curiosity.
Yeah.
Instead of figuring it out on my own.
Yeah.
Or going to Joann's or, any of those stores, Michael's.
Mm-hmm.
And that was just wasting, that was totally, that was a personality problem that needed to be solved.
I have that problem too.
Who doesn't? But if we look at what we have, literally if you, and we'll talk about it next time when we talk about clarity, so I don't want to go there yet. But I do think there's something to be said for looking through the things you already have. And when something, listen, and when something says, oh, try me, like the watercolor.
Yeah.
Or you think to yourself, oh, I never really have that's brand new. I never got that out before. Get it out and just play with it. And don't feel as though it has to have an end goal. Yeah. We want everything to have an end goal. I talk about it in one of my lectures about how we all have these different personality styles. We're collectors and we never do anything with what we collect. Or, every single thing has to be finished by God because that's just kind of who we are. Mm-hmm. Or we never finish a project because we get halfway through and we're afraid because we don't want to fail. These are all issues that here's the thing that we're all up against.
Yeah.
And so the curiosity goes both ways, doesn't it? It's like when you notice that about yourself, and now we're getting into another level, and of course this is not therapy, but when there's something I don't really want to do and I'm resisting it, I don't feel bad anymore thinking, well, what's going on with that, Jane?
Yeah.
Why don't I want to do that? It's another kind of curiosity and this goes back to the comment that was made earlier about being gentle with yourself. So there isn't there's no wrong answer, but there is a great deal to be gained from embracing those shadow sides that you haven't been willing to be curious about because it was too threatening for some reason. Mm-hmm. Yeah, play is the key, says Linda. Let's see. Michael Ann says, I keep a smash book that my thoughts, ideas, frustrations, blahs go into. It gets scribbled on, painted, scrunched, stenciled, whatever the driving emotion wants.
That.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another thing I run into and caught myself thinking as I was doing the watercolor was, how am I improving? What am I learning? What am I getting out of this time? Like, I always would have to be gaining something, and that's not, I'm putting so much pressure on myself to not play and not just experience the time and open my mind, because if it's closing my mind really
Mm-hmm.
when I'm so focused on the outcome.
Yeah. Yeah, which is exactly, well, it is. I'm just going to talk about it. So here's the issue. When somebody plans a project, like, well, you can't see it because it's on, well, you sort of can. I've got a piece over here on the table I've been getting ready to ship out. But when you're working on something and you have a predetermined plan, no matter what it is, it could be planning a garden, it could be a recipe. You have a predetermined plan that you're intending to follow, and something goes awry. You realize that that area that you were going to plant, thinking of the beautiful garden of my friends on Bainbridge Island with these amazing dahlias, and they didn't get that whole garden to automatically happen. They thought about it, but then they were also open to the possibility once they'd lived there for a while and they understood where the sun was going to move. Mm-hmm. And when you're making a recipe and you think, oh yeah, I've got tomato paste, and you don't, and you're not going to the store. You had a glass of wine and it's 5 o'clock. You're not going to the store. So you have to improvise. And that means you've got to be curious about what the options are. Mm-hmm. And I think that there's something to be said for not having a work plan. It's the same thing when people have too close. Now, when you're piecing, okay, maybe the points have to match in order to be satisfying. But in a lot of the things that we're doing, we can substitute and we can be open to new ideas that come along as we're working that can change whatever we're working on substantially and actually raise the joy level of working on it because we were able to problem solve and succeed. Mm-hmm. And that wouldn't exist if we didn't allow ourselves the opportunity to experience it. Mm-hmm. And so in a way, we're kind of, there's a Mary Chapin Carpenter song, rest in the arms of the great wide open. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what creativity is. It's resting in the arms of the great wide open in order to allow ideas to come in. And if we could just relax into that and relax into, could I do something for 5 minutes or not? Then, or maybe I don't want to. Looking, do I have to have an hour? You know, do I have to have an hour? Do I have to have time for all of this self-care every single day, or none of it is worth doing?
That's, oh man, that's a struggle for me too.
Yeah.
Just, I feel like I need a certain amount of time to get myself into the mode of even allowing myself to be open. Mm-hmm. But I don't think that's right. On the other hand, sometimes I just scribble something or a little poem or something, and it's something that I'm the most proud of that I've done, and mm-hmm. It's just kind of instantaneous. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And mm-hmm. I don't know, that is very hard for me to shift my mind into being creative, mm-hmm. which is a whole nother block, I think, because mm-hmm. you can mm-hmm. always kind of live in that space. Mm-hmm. and not have to turn it on.
Yeah, you shouldn't have to shift in and out.
Right.
But it takes practice to be there. I don't know, I'm trying to think of a really good metaphor for it, and I don't have one yet, but it's almost like wherever you live, you know every room in the house, and you know everything that's in the closets, and you just know everything, and you just live there. You don't question it.
Yeah.
You don't question, well, where's the bathroom? Hopefully you don't. Or you have, I think most of us have a pretty good sense of what exists in the surroundings. Mm-hmm. And so if you think of yourself as that internal equivalent, mm-hmm. then you have all those resources inside, and you're always in the same house. So you don't have to open the door and let the creativity come in. The creativity built the house. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's not good.
No, I don't know. I get it. Yeah. Yeah.
I saw an interesting question from Gary Parr saying, is your creativity affected when other people start to get involved in the project?
That's a good question.
Which is veering a little away from where we are, looking right now only at ourselves. But I think that's an interesting question too. Do you have an immediate impulse or response to that?
I would say my creativity tends to get dampened or shut down a little bit mm-hmm. when I have to take other points of view into
into
consideration.
consideration. I love
That's
it.
that sounds. I just think about, like honestly decorating some rooms in our house and or our own garden space. And my husband and I have very different ideas about what we
Yeah.
want to do, and we have learned to work together. But when I feel kind of open and free to make the decisions myself, I feel like
You know
I feel
why? You
happier.
know why? It's time to finish choosing your chart
That's true.
because you have a queen.
I probably do. Maybe. I don't know.
Most people, it's a really bad idea. Just so you know, I shouldn't have even done that. It's a bad idea to tell other people what their archetypes are.
That's true.
It's a really bad
Actually, this
idea.
year I do. I can't believe I've never done it. I'm
Well,
going
we've
to.
talked around it,
Yeah.
but you
Yeah.
were under 30, and most people under 30 are not allowed to choose their archetypes. You haven't lived long enough.
That sounds fair.
That's, you know, I'm the guide who makes an excuse for anybody who needs one.
Yeah. Yeah.
But in any event, that's a great answer. But I also think that see, my more politically correct or socially correct answer would have been that's why we need community.
Yeah. Yeah.
It
And
is and it isn't though.
actually, I immediately thought about other instances where I was working on a team and kind of bouncing ideas off of other people, and I felt way more creative. It
Mm-hmm.
was,
Mm-hmm.
it was a whole different experience. So I think there's different
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
instances, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
or examples. But
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
yeah, sorry. Where were you going with that?
Oh, well, thanks for acknowledging it. Where I was going with it is that the third cornerstone of creativity, as far as what I think, and it is, this is a construct of mind, so that's the default or the disclaimer, I guess, is that, oh, well, here's why. Here's why. When we can cultivate our curiosity and we begin to come into our own and we're living in the house that creativity built, and we don't feel like we have to just leave it all in the garage
Mm-hmm.
and then go out there anytime we're going to get in the car or whatever, it's getting worse as I go along. Um, when we're living in that creative place, then I think that when we've done that long enough, and when we make it a point to reach out, or I'm going to use the word manifest because I do think we draw to us, especially if we're conscious, we can recognize when people are on our wavelength and maybe when they're not, or we're willing to find out if they are.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't mean anybody's bad. It just means that some of us have more in common than others. And when we find other people that have things in common with us and we are intentionally seeking them out, then we're in a setting where we can feel safe. And that means that if we start to partner with other people or collaborate with other people, which is what I'm thinking Gary meant, then we're in a comfort zone that allows us to be more open and freer with those other people. And then that doesn't shut down our individual creativity. And in fact, it can power everybody's creativity up.
Yeah.
It's a gestalt, really, because then everybody is beyond the we're individual parts, and the sum of that is bigger than we are.
Yeah. Yes.
And that's really what we want
Mm-hmm.
from if you don't mind me saying so, that is really what we're after on a larger scale in terms of how we're all evolving.
And just going back a minute, feeling more grounded and secure in your own creativity, then allows you to look at what other people are doing and be inspired by it instead of feeling threatened, like
Exactly.
that, like what I do is not as good as what they're
Right.
doing, or whatever that negative talk is.
Yeah, exactly.
And just appreciate what they do and incorporate ideas
Yeah.
into your own work.
Yeah.
And that's huge.
Yeah, because I think that's definitely one of the things that shuts it down, is because I know that, so quick personal story. When I was at the Southwest Crafts Center and I was the low artist on the totem pole, even though at that point I wasn't managing a department, I was just an artist in residence. And you were too little, so you won't remember this, but the director invited 12 artists from all across Texas, Joe Ely and a lot of very well-known singers and artists. And for a week, they were going to do a big installation in the gallery and then have a party with music. And, I mean, this is the 80s, so it was a 80s style Texas party.
Wow.
But during the week, we were all in this gallery, and 2 or 3 of these guys who knew each other were collaborating. They didn't care what that little girl in the corner was going to do at all, which was really hard for me because I already felt intimidated by who they were.
So you were part of the installation?
I was part of it because all the department chairs were part of it.
Okay.
Well, I wasn't a department chair yet, so I think maybe I was just, I don't know why I was there.
Okay.
I don't know why I was there, but I was there because I was an artist in residence and I was a helper. But I didn't see it as a helping job as much as I saw it as my own opportunity to participate fully.
Yeah.
Maybe apparently I assumed too much because I might cry. I had a little wooden chair that I found. They brought in all this crap out of the storage area or like a attic that people could just use and appropriate and whatever, because it was this big installation. And there was a chair, and I took this chair, and then there was a mirror, and I broke the mirror all up into little shards of mirror, and I glued them. My first blind date with E6000, glued them all over this chair so it was completely covered with mirror glass. Are you getting the symbolism of this? And then I put 2 nails on the wall because it was just a kid's chair. It wasn't very big. And well, it's bigger than that. But I put it on the wall in an area that hadn't been developed yet, because it seemed to me that what they were doing is they would do this on the wall over here, and then they would do that on the wall over there, and then they were gradually incorporating everything, kind of like Meow Wolf. I can hardly wait till this ends. I want to go and see what they're doing. But so it would all eventually be one grand and elaborate and nutso whole. So I was really proud of this. Meanwhile, no one's talking to me at all, including the director, except a woman who was a photographer who was a little older than me. Lovely woman. I don't remember her name right now. I went home. I went back the next day, really excited about what was happening there, and my chair was gone. And I didn't have the courage to ask, where is my chair? It had been taken off the wall, so obviously somebody did this. It didn't just vaporize. And so then they asked me to help clean up, and because they were going to open up a new space to work on. And I picked up some cardboard and some stuff like that, and I took it out to the dumpster, and there was my chair. So that wasn't a safe feeling at all.
That's awful.
It wasn't a safe feeling at all. And you know what else it made me? I'm sorry. I hadn't even thought about that for years and years, but you know what that really made me recognize? Because I hadn't even thought about teaching yet. That made me, on some subliminal level that I couldn't even recognize because that was so painful at the time, I was never going to do that, not only to another person, never to you, never to anybody I knew. And I was not going to do it to any student in any situation ever. And you know what? That was one of the best things that ever happened to me because of what I learned from that. And that is where wounded healers come from. And that's where compassion comes from. And that's where sensitivity comes from. And it all is rooted, if you don't mind me saying so, in being curious about how other people feel, instead of assuming that what you want to do is the best thing. And what you want to do should prevail. So we're talking about something really elemental here, really elemental. And I don't want anyone else to learn that lesson the way I learned it, because there are a lot of other easier ways to learn it, I think. But when that happens, at the time, it's incredibly painful, which is true of so many things that happen to us. And yet, in the long run, we can only be grateful that it happened, because those are literally the trials by fire that make us the human beings who are authentic, that we want to, there's a purpose there that we want to fulfill. There's something there we want to grow into.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can model that for other people, and the world's a better place. And it all begins with, it's dumb, it all begins with curiosity, doesn't it? So let's see, what else should we talk about? Oh, I'm all right, you know.
Yeah.
My friend Ione said, if Jane didn't cry once, you didn't get your money's worth. So, and we got to keep talking about it, because if we don't talk about it, no one else will, not in quite this same way, because this is about creativity.
Mm-hmm.
We can talk about a lot of other, all kinds of other stuff. We can talk about archetypes, for example, from all other perspectives. But when we talk about archetypes, we're talking about how they are your support staff for your creative life.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a significant shift in how we see them that can only benefit anyone who looks into it, either by reading the stuff on the website or delving into it more deeply. So I think it's all really important.
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad you're here.
Me too.
Yeah. So we're almost out of time. Is there something else we should say before we go?
We could look at a few more questions.
Okay.
I think we wanted to invite people to share something that they jumped into, something that they might be curious about and acted on last week or this week, maybe in that Creative Strength Collective Facebook group that's open for anyone to join.
Yeah.
And just see what other people are working on, because that we did that a few years ago when we kind of challenged people to share something related to each cornerstone, and it was really, really neat to see what people were doing.
It was.
And what their kind of the mindfulness experience was
Yeah.
like for them.
Yeah. Yeah. And if we do it there, obviously we're getting some wonderful comments here that we can't address them all, unfortunately. I wish we were all in one big room together and we had all evening, frankly. And I wish we had a big buffet laid out for you, because that'd be so fantastic. And now I'm realizing all the social things I miss, and it's lunchtime, yeah, or happy hour, I don't know which. But anyhow, I just wanted to acknowledge, let's see, might already be gone. I think Judy said that she didn't do workshops anymore because of an abusive teacher. So many of us have experiences like that we can relate. And somebody else wanted to be reminded what the 4 cornerstones were. And so you can see what's going to come up over the next few weeks. And did you post that essay on the website that I wrote?
It was in the newsletter, but I'll post it on the website too.
Okay, that'd be great. Maybe we could even put it up as a file on the collective
in the
page.
group. Yeah, we can do that
we
too.
could do that. So here's what they are. Curiosity. Next week, we're going to talk about clarity. Clarity involves clearing out, getting clear about your preferences. So when you're clear about your preferences, making poor choices is greatly diminished. Then the third week, we'll talk about community, because when you're clear and you're getting your preferences organized and you're curious, you're the perfect candidate to be part of a community of like-minded people. And that's our wish. And then the last week, we'll talk about confidence, because without curiosity and clarity, and you can have confidence anyhow. I guess community and confidence are really interrelated, but when you're in a community of supportive people, that's a way of boosting confidence also. Mm-hmm. So we're going to talk about each of those in more detail, and we actually have some things that are kind of fun planned around that. Today it was mainly conversation and our samples, but if you would add anything you'd like to add on the collective page, that would be great. And we are going to post this. Where's this end up?
This will always live on Facebook, on your page, the just Jane Dunewald page. I'm sure it'll be shared on the collective too, and we'll post it on the website too, on the Creative Cornerstones page. I saw someone ask about the newsletter info. You can sign up at the bottom of janedunawald.com. Um, and we send out one kind of general newsletter every month with all kinds of tutorials and usually a recipe and some
Yeah.
interesting, fun
Whatever we
things.
want to do because we're grown-ups.
Yeah. um, what's the collective page? It's called the Creative Strength Collective, and it's just a group, an open public group that we run. That we're actually, it's been kind of, it's existed for 2 or 3 years now,
Mm-hmm.
but I think we're going to
Mm-hmm.
post some little challenges there
Mm-hmm.
every month,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yes, this was recorded. We will share it on.
Oh, she sees you just answered the question.
Okay.
So that's good.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and we can't sign you up for the newsletter and we wouldn't harvest your information anyhow. But you can go to the website and sign up for the newsletter there, and we would be delighted for you to do that. And on the 14th of February, we're having a party. It's my birthday. And I'm going to give a short lecture that should be fun. And we've got some game type stuff. And we also have a PDF of heart designs that you can download, and you can make something from one of those designs, be inspired in whatever way you wish. If you send it to me before the 14th, and my email address is on the website, then I'll put up those and show everything everybody made, which should be fun. And then we'll just randomly draw and send people prizes. So I figured it's a big year and I can't celebrate by going anywhere, so I just wanted to bring all of you to me. I hope you can come, but you'll have to bring your own cake and champagne.
And I'm just sharing a few links in the chat. I'm going to share, I shared your website at the bottom of that. It's a
Great.
newsletter, and then I'll share a link to the Creative Strength Collective too.
Great. Okay. Good. Yeah. So it's been a delight. Thanks for spending the afternoon part of it with us, and it's a privilege to be with you. And we look forward to hearing anything you ever want to send to us, or questions, or whatever. We've got a pretty great thing with our small family protected group right now, but you're our social life. So we're there for you, and hopefully you're there for us. It's a great win-win. Take care.